They won't. They don't know the chemistry, so
Okay,
I gotta buff them up with some knowledge first, I guess.
okay, good.
I think for me, students will never ask the question of like, how can I best make whatever argument I'm making in my essay, and look first to the requirements set by the instructor and say, oh, well, I need, 3 sources for this assignment, therefore I only need 3 sources, and never ask the critical question, is this enough evidence to adequately make my point, or do I need to have more evidence? Am I missing anything?
Good. Yeah. Other thoughts?
I might say summary and synthesis is like a broad thing for a lot of students in my experience. And it's especially like talking to students about something they've written like off of the page. Like when students like turn in an essay or turn a piece of writing and saying, okay, it's like away from the page, like what's the main point you're making? Students struggling to sort of make that jump from page to sort of oral communication
Okay.
across different disciplines and what students are doing. It's like summary synthesis is I think a big skill that we often I can say, oh, summarize this. That's really difficult to do. It involves a lot of critical thinking in my experience.
Okay. How do you all define critical thinking? The critical, what does that mean to you?
I consider it as one of the highest levels of Bloom's taxonomy based on my knowledge of Bloom's taxonomy. It used to be the highest, now it's the second highest. So, you're sitting back and using your knowledge to critique. So you're evaluating too, you're creating new thoughts, and so it's very high level, and it's successful if you get students there, and they enjoy it too. They enjoy being critics. They feel like this is why I went to college, not so I can memorize structures, but so I can take it further.
Other thoughts?
I feel like critical thinking is how to answer how rather than what. Because and I think it's just answering the question, but how is how you perceive or where you're going to.
Along those lines, I often think about some sort of like translation is involved. There's like an application or like a restructuring of it or rephrasing of it, like the how piece of like something sort of changes from what's been given to something kind of new in some ways.
Some chats there.
Heather, it's coming from the chat too.
Nope, so far, no, we're all just
Okay.
acknowledging that the AV setup is working for everyone at home,
Okay.
which I appreciate, thank you.
I try to explain to my students that it's going beyond the obvious, like you can't find this on Google, as a way to try to help them begin to grasp the differences between critical thinking. So, let's see. So in true teacher action, we have some objectives. We're going to go up Bloom's taxonomy. So we're going to start by defining hexagonal thinking, understanding how it can be used to make thinking tactile and improve critical thinking. You all are going to actually get to do that today. So you're going to demonstrate. And then you're going to collaborate with a peer to create an adaptation of hexagonal thinking that can be applied in your class in the next 30 days. So I'm very big about being practical. So I don't want you just to hear me talk. I want you to leave here with something that you can implement in your classes even this semester. So some challenges that I saw in my classroom were very similar to what you all have already expressed. So I would see students who would give me lots of summary, even when I was asking for them to give me analysis or give me critique or give me synthesis. I'll notice that a lot of the writing was disjointed. So for example, if we were looking at 2 texts, they wouldn't be able to connect, at least in a written form, the ideas in those 2 texts. And so I found this activity probably on social media or Pinterest, and teachers at the secondary level use this particular learning strategy. And once I started using it, students had light bulb moments. They began to understand how texts were connected. And so sometimes I think my students don't always understand why I have them do the things that they do, because they don't see the connections. And this activity helped bridge those gaps. I also found that their critical thinking actually did improve by using this activity. So we're going to look at a short demonstration of what it is, and then I'm going to have you all do it.
Hexagonal thinking is a really creative.
Is the volume okay? Okay. Do captions.
Mode for discussion. Concept in a whole new way. It gets students to practice critical thinking and real world skills in terms of explaining, debating, and writing. You can use it as a great review to go back over a unit. You can use it as a launch to any type of project or paper. It's super easy to make a template. You just drop little hexagon shapes onto your slide and add some text on top. Pick out some interesting terms from your unit and some connections from other disciplines or ideas from pop culture, news, world history, anything that could connect to what you're studying. Let's say that you had just taught the book 1984. You might start by just choosing some basic terms like Orwell, the title of the book, and then some concepts like doublethink and thought crime, and some characters like Winston, Julia, O'Brien. But then you might think about, okay, what can I pull out of history of Marx and Stalin and the Cold War? And I'm going to think about today in terms like online privacy, surveillance, Big Brother. And now I have a deck of terms for my students where they're going to be thinking specifically about the book, but also about world history and pop culture. So once you have come up with your set of 20 or so hexagons, divide your students into small groups, and they start moving hexagons around and saying, how can I connect these? What hexagon deserves one of the 6 sides of another hexagon? And then is there a hexagon that can sort of tuck into that corner that connects to both? There's never a right answer. With 20 hexagons, you could have 100, 200 different maps. And what matters is the conversation that goes on when you're trying to decide, this goes here, that goes there. How can you argue for it? Maybe you give them 20 minutes or so to build their web. And by the end, your group has come up with something really original, at which point you're going to invite them to rebuild that. That could look like recording a Flipgrid, writing individually, snapping a screenshot, taping the web up on the walls and explaining the connections, and then doing a gallery walk. There's just so much room for debate, and there's so much emotion and excitement. Students really have to be pulling ideas from different courses and putting it all together. And I think that's where the critical thinking really comes in. And then those conversations become really memorable.
Right, so you all are going to do this activity. So you can form 2 groups and then there's 2 sets. I'm giving you all a small set for the sake of time. And there's 3 that have words and then there's some that are blank. So you all can gather together and engage in the activity. And I'll walk around, maybe folks have questions.
That was all of the explanation.
So I'll give you 7 minutes.
Also, we had to write.
We're filling in the blank ones?
Yeah.
Right as I was leaving my office, I was like.
I'm removing the back.
Okay, Patrick.
Go for it.
Oh.
You gave us a lot of good ones, Jesse. It's nice.
Oh.
Right.
So.
3. Oh, that's there.
Oh,
Oh, there it
oh,
is.
gotcha.
All right. Yeah. Oh, it's backwards. Here, I'll type it in the chat.
Yeah, problem solved.
Is that we should include like not elements that don't necessarily seem directly connected in a way, and think about how they.
Yeah. And you don't have to start connecting these 3.
Okay. So basically, we can write whatever we want. I just go.
As long as it's connected and it's logical and makes sense, yes.
What if we all took 3 and then sort of like. All wrote out 3 and then we can
Just random whatever we want.
yeah, I mean, we can go out here. Which I guess.
You want to put that one up?
Okay, I have an extra. Oh, perfect, thank you.
Understanding, I think it's a little higher.
Yep.
I think it was. Goals.
I want to put goals early on, because to my mind, it's like, oh, the goals are gonna like dictate
That's
everything
how you
else.
know where to go.
Yeah, 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 that's gonna help me get to the other points.
There's also. Higher than criticism.
Or like synthesis.
Yeah. Done.
It's hard to just, think of like, should I?
Put that higher up and then. Another one of them was 506, right?
If we're going to form, yes, application is the all I want.
Yeah, we haven't started talking about that, so we can start now.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess I went more from what I context.
I was thinking about my students when I wrote this in terms of like their individuals, sort of like educational.
You got about 3.5 minutes, 3.5 minutes.
Something challenging. So the challenge is. This is too big.
Yeah. I'm looking at it.
Knowledge to be a problem too.
No, yeah.
I would put it a little higher.
Well, I guess,
All right, so Tammy said questions would be
Ooh.
another.
Back in my conversation.
Would be nice. That'd be super. Thinking still right here.
it depends on like what we're like organizing by, so like.
This institutional instructional support. That's fine. I was gonna write down institutional.
It's a very quick way.
Great, wait, what we doing?
Yeah.
Mind map, yes, yes.
Oh, and
See, this.
I forgot.
Right, it's a challenge to get that, because the budget, and then the budget's also.
Like, so I'm interested to critical thinking, like changing it around a little bit, so like, this application's gonna involve some critical thinking, right? So it seems like to my mind, it's like the jump to critical thinking might happen.
Oh, yeah, really. All right, now you're on the spot.
Like the basic idea. And now, like,
Ooh.
the second sentence that we don't apply here, maybe. As far as one to add on.
That was big. I like that, because knowledge, this is glucose. It doesn't take too much. Critical thinking.
Yeah.
It's a carbohydrate, it's part of.
Yeah.
Promotion, a year promotion.
For knowledge.
See, I might put that one up there, because like, the conclusions might come about as a result of critical thinking. Like, if I'm thinking of the word conclusions, if I'm telling students just to remember some knowledge and some facts, I'm not asking them to make a lot of conclusions about it. I was just saying like
Right.
career and like repeat back to me like what a thesis statement is, not necessarily concluding what makes one good.
And Jonah also just levels of knowledge build. It's like foundation.
Financial aid or like affordability for the college.
Where do we want to put levels of knowledge? Is that?
What I mean, I'm visualizing my radiography students.
Your understanding.
Oh, yeah, because I kind of like that as like knowledge to understanding is like, when like levels of knowledge, I'm not sure if this.
Can you hear me okay?
Knowledge, you have to kind of categorize it and classify the
So pick
knowledge.
someone who will explain.
This is just reversed.
Can you hear me?
I can, I don't know if they can.
Yeah.
They can, okay.
Right.
Oh.
So,
You can play with the thing.
Minutes?
So pick someone who will
You,
explain.
you feel like you've got as much as I want.
Could you
Yeah, that's the picture here. You kept going off, and I wasn't sure if you could see it.
So next semester, I'm saying.
Oh, sorry. I paused your timer completely unintentionally. I like that.
What's your last name? Harvey.
I didn't recognize because you're not in my phone number. I'm Ramon. I'm the one who sits in the echo.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I have not. Hard grade and.
Yeah, you will see my email a week before, I like to remind you like, hey, mention.
I'm gonna put collaboration.
Collaboration.
I don't know where it might go, but I like this.
Yeah, you're not embarrassed, yes. It's 16 weeks.
So it's sort of a, so you have to put it above knowledge, but then again, yeah, but it's a higher. You have to have some knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's a type of. That's really, I think you just have to move these over, have to join it, just not. And
So because.
with that one blank.
8 o'clock.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I am not.
So let's have a field trip. This group, we're gonna walk over here, and this group is going to explain their connections to us.
Do you want to explain some, Chuck, or do you want me to?
You.
All right, so our words we had, I'm not sure if it's the same words you all had or not, were goals, challenges, critical thinking. We want to start off with goals at the very bottom, as goals are going to dictate like what we're going to do with critical thinking, and goals are going to dictate everything else. Chuck's suggestion was to kind of work with critical thinking in relationship to other sort of levels of cognitive domains with the Bloom stuff. So what we're asking students to do, are we asking them just to know stuff, which isn't quite critical thinking? Once students understand, once they understand what they're knowing, then critical thinking becomes more of a possibility. Some places to go with critical thinking can be application of ideas, synthesis. One of the big sort of goals of critical thinking we said was to make conclusions. And so if someone's just regurgitating facts or knowledge, even if they understand it, like a good sign of critical thinking is, oh, they're making conclusions about it. Like they're building to some sort of larger point maybe being made. We thought about sort of questions coming up, questions being possibly a sign of critical thinking as well. Other things you'd fill in, Chuck?
Yeah, basically, my example is always, starting with chemicals and things, because biology is all about, you start off with the chemicals, and then as you move on up, you start to create more knowledge, you understand, and you start to criticize. You say, you know what, these artificial sweeteners, they might be actually stimulating other parts of your body. Maybe that's why they're affecting people's pancreas, more pancreatic cancer. You start applying it, you come up with conclusions, and then you have questions and answers over here on the side, which is hanging from understanding and knowledge. Critical thinking and collaboration over here is, higher levels of thinking. And there's just so many more we could add here, applying it to the real world and getting rid of artificial sweeteners, which is one of my secret pet peeves. So I don't know if that helps.
I like it, I like that.
You all mentioned that conclusion and goals were connected, but visually and tactile, they're not connected.
Oh.
Is there a reason why you all didn't connect them?
No, we could, connect them. I think we just have to reshape it a little bit.
Okay.
Think in a third dimension.
Yeah,
Hold it onto itself.
we were far too like linear and temporal.
I know.
You need the table to be bent.
Yeah.
Circle, I like that. There you go.
But see, this worked with you all's way of processing information, right?
Yes.
Because you all are more like, I could tell you like an A to Z type
Yeah,
of thinking, which is
exactly.
okay, but it worked for you all. But then let's go over here and let's see how they approach. Activity.
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
Well, we kind of, I guess, from our center on out, thought about like success in the classroom. That's kind of like our center. And what kind of are the big challenges for students in terms of getting to that success point? So a couple of offshoot items, we had like success being in like budget, both instructionally and institutionally, and also the affordability of the college for students leading students to things like that. Upper college, we also looked at success in terms of like career outcomes and how that's related to all these people problem solving in the classroom learning challenges. I put here, this one's a little bit unique, instructional supplies related to success in terms of the college then budgeting for the equipment and items and consumables that are needed to teach in a variety of different areas. So it was pretty similar. Just kind of wrapped around that with critical thinking, goals in education.
And also, if you look at the challenges, it's surrounded with success, critical thinking, goals, and education, because it's connected the challenge. You can't have a success if you don't have challenges. So you can't have goals if you don't have challenges. You can't go education if there's no challenge, or you can't learn if there's no challenge. So you learn from that. So that's also kind of surrounding with the critical thinking, principle supplies, and learning through faculty education, and problem solving through the success as well.
Great, thank you. So what did you all think?
It's a good activity. It's a good activity, definitely.
And how much time you think that would take you to prep?
Not that long at all, and it was fun. It's like putting a puzzle together.
The brainstorming is really good, like, so. And that's the point about critical thinking. You start small, then now you go broader.
I don't know like the vocabulary for this, but like so often when I think about like visualization and diagramming with students and faculty too, like it's on a like that, like the whiteboard is like the plane for it, or even the video, like what was set up and like doing it now where I'm looking down on it. There was something that was interesting that changed there. Like it felt closer to like a board game. Like I know moving tiles and like a setting, things like that. So it opened things up a little bit to think differently. And I like the idea of it also set it up to be more collaborative, to be like looking down, at least with our group, than like looking up at a vertical board, I guess the way to describe it.
So I'll say this before I jump to my slides. One reason why I like this activity is I think a lot of times in college classrooms, we forget about our tactile learner, our student that fidgets, that needs to touch things. And so I like this activity because they can excel with that. And then it's a visual component. So I try to have my students up, moving around, interacting and touching things. So that's one reason why I like this particular activity. Let's see what else we have on the slides. Any feedback from folks on Zoom? Want to acknowledge your presence.
Nope, you just gotta thank you for giving us the additional views.
Okay, so we just did thoughts. All right, so here's what I've learned from using this particular activity. It is an equal opportunity activity. So usually I use it based on reading. So even if the students have not read, they can still participate. And so that's one thing that's really important, to have an activity that everyone can participate. Also, the engagement is high, like you all noticed. Everybody was contributing. That's what it looks like when I've done it in the classroom. Even if the student has not read, is not familiar with the topic, everyone participates. Of course, it's at different levels, but everyone can participate. I also like this activity because different people process, different people think differently, but it's something that everyone can do together. And I have seen an improvement in critical thinking and a connection of ideas. So I use it, for example, I have my students do comparative analysis where they're reading two texts and they're looking at the differences between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, but of course I want them to go deeper. And so I use the hexagon activity with that. And then I'll have the students, okay, take a picture of your hexagons and write me a paragraph. And I found that the paragraphs are a lot stronger because of that. And there are different ways that you can use these hexagons. So for example, you can take, let's say you're a history professor. I'll stand up here if that makes it easier for people on Zoom. You can take a hexagon and write a date. This is a center hexagon. And then you can give students 5 or 6, for that particular year, give me 5 or 6 significant events that occurred. You could take, pretty much anything you can put on these. You can put an image on these and have students select these. You can take a quote and say, okay, tell me the significance of this particular quote. Or you can also get into color coding. So let's say you wanted to have dates one color, historical figures one color, states another color. So there's different ways that you can also take this activity and branch out. And so one thing that I'm going to give you is I created a Google folder, and I'll probably have time to walk you through it with some different resources for how you can adapt this, how you can do it online, different assessments and things of that nature. So there were some challenges with this activity. So what I found is my students are great at word association. So what you all did, where you just came up with words, phenomenal. They could do that, knock that out of the park. When I started putting quotes on these, it was like, whoa, wait a minute. There were some challenges with that. And that was getting to that deeper level of critical thinking. I think, word association is a pretty, basic level. It's important. I think that's a great place to start. And so I'm going to be adapting this exercise to have a connection of more complex information. And so what I did, I just brainstormed, and this isn't all fleshed out, but just to show you my thinking, as I began to think about, well, what are the different levels of connection that students can make with the content that I'm teaching? This, of course, is going to look different. You teach biology, is that right?
Yes.
So none of this will be applicable, right, if you teach biology. But I was just thinking, okay, so in my composition class or in my literature class, what are different types of connection? Well, the students can connect text based on word association. They connect to direct quotation from one text to a direct quotation in another text, or within the same text. They can do it by topic. They can do it by genre, point of view, structure, form, types of characters. So I made this list. And then I said, okay, let me make a ladder. What's the simplest and what's the most complex? And so with this activity, again, you can do the same activity multiple times, but just make it more complex as you do this, because the thing that I wanted my students to do in comp classes, for example, is I want them to be able to connect 2 different direct quotations so that their writing flows, so that they're not just dumping evidence in a paragraph and not explaining how it's connected. And so using this activity is a way to help them do that. So when you implement this in your class, give them the word association, they're gonna have a great time. But then ask yourself, what are the levels of connection, or what are the levels of critical thinking that they struggle with, and how can I use this exercise to help them get there? All right, so now I'm gonna have you get back in your groups, and I want you to think about what are the levels of connection in my own discipline? Which levels will be the hardest for students to reach? What support are they going to need? And how might this activity help students get there? So I want you to come up with, here's a hexagonal activity. So I want you to do 2 things. So you're going to do this first thing. I want you to ponder the levels of connection. And I want you to think about how the hexagonal activity can help you get there. Let's do that one first. Let's not do 2 things at once. Let's start with this. So get with your groups, and I want you all to think about the levels of connection. And if you're like, I don't know what that means, I'll walk around and we'll chat about it.
Right. She's talking about this. This is the genius way of playing. Right? Yeah. You want to start talking.
Yeah. Well, exactly as said,
I already have an idea.
I
don't know.
But you wrote it since directly next week. It's like, if you're doing it like this, you would never, you would always have like the concepts in between that like are represented
Literally,
visually.
yeah.
And I think that's a
Made
good.
of cells.
Can you hear him?
Demonstrating that
Can you
visually.
hear us or no?
You would no one is
Okay, just checking. Cool.
like just putting. it into
Chemicals, cells, the cells get together and become teams of cell tissues, which start with the letter T. And those get together 2 or more to create these things you can hold in your hand called organ. The organs are part of organ systems, and the organ systems are part of the organism. But above that, there's family, society, population dynamics, whether you run around in the summer or you shovel snow in the summer. And higher things up there. So then, there's things like the proteins that are made by the muscle, like collagen.
I think, so
Collagen is
low
also
level
made
of connection,
by
talking about like the word association
the-
versus.
Right.
Okay, yeah, so like
by the
we
bone,
mostly just in
soft tissues of our, that's called
like,
non.
level of
So,
connection.
Yeah.
and then there's like
Yeah, can you go back?
things related to
Sure.
that,
Possible.
chemicals that body makes, let's say hormones are made by a particular place, a particular gland. So,
Yes.
and then for just the skeletal system, there's long bones, short bones, flat bones, irregular bones, and then there's bones of children, there's bones of adults, there's bones that
So
are
then you all.
broken, there's bones that are
Teach or something different. than
broken
just
down from
think about
osteoporosis. So
what are those
there's
levels?
just so many
So let's say you talk
connections
history.
that I personally
That word
talk about
association
homeostasis.
terms. What other
And
levels?
I criticize it. I say homeostasis is, more than just a thermostat.
Myths, people.
Our body is more than a thermostat. People in California come here in March and it's 50, 60 degrees. We're taking off our clothes, but they're like, it's 50 degrees, it's freezing.
Yeah.
Well, we laugh at them, but
Just
we're the
gave
same thing in
subject,
July. If it goes
gave
down to 50 or
geography.
60 in July.
And what
we're
about
freezing.
time?
So homeostasis
Right, so
is
then you all want to make a
is,
list
positive
those,
feedback, negative
just what you
feedback.
said,
There's
and then just make
there's
a
two
list.
types of
One, two, three,
homeostasis,
four.
peripheral, if you
Which
say
one
all
is most complex?
fingers get all numb or calluses. There's central homeostasis and there's cellular homeostasis, cells get responsible. Putting all these and putting them together. is What I
Well, you
do
just
when I'm
said-
writing the.
Oh, it's just an.
Yeah, what's-
I have one
Yeah.
concept. and I-
That was-
in my
that was-
mind, I have 5, 6 of them.
You can apply.
My brain, I usually don't think of anything more than that. I wonder if that has to do with the phone number concept,
Here we
where you
have
can only remember
association,
7
and then
numbers,
we
which
have
is like
like
6. Maybe it has something to do with that.
Person or day.
Whatever.
Okay, levels that you're talking
Yeah, my levels, I think we're just in biology,
Level, so
my
like.
level
already.
was like, I can write it down.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it was chemical.
Is like the next sort of level, so it's like.
For me,
Word
it's
association
for cellular,
Level
and then
it's like, okay,
tissue,
we're not gonna connect
and then it's the organ, such as the liver,
A
and
day.
it's part of an organ system.
So if you have a
And then
service.
it's also part of the organism, which is the actual, human being. But the funny thing is, they say we have bacteria in our body, on our body, that is found in our intestine, in our organs, and then there's, of course,
This way. to
family that
understand
matters,
the
and population and society that can affect how
Something.
much you exercise or whether you go out
This
for a
way,
walk in the winter and shovel snow,
So
that can affect
which
you.
of these is gonna be harder for the students to grasp?
Honestly, probably the cellular tissue level and the chemical level, they often ignore that and they focus on the liver. The liver does this. Well, the reason the liver does that is because it has a lot of subcellular organelles and
Okay.
so this area to them is really difficult and they don't know what, they think of the stomach, they say the stomach is a muscle. No, the stomach is more than a muscle. The stomach is also a surface. It's an inner surface, and outer surface. It's a gland. There's so much going on in every tissue. So this area,
Right.
they know, oh, that's the liver. But they say, oh, it's,
Point of view.
stupid looking organ, but it's got like 300 functions. You can't live without it. So
So then how would you use the hexagons to teach them these lower?
oh, okay, so like for the skin, there's protein, yeah, I get it. Okay, so for the chemicals for each one, to give examples. So. Yeah, so for the cellular level,
Oh, we have.
we would have to include, for the cellular level, we would have to include what that cell makes. So for example, for the endocrine system, the cells make hormones.
Religion.
So hormones are something made by cells, they're sort of chemicals, so they're biological chemicals, which makes them
Okay.
chemical,
Give me one more.
I guess. And then the other thing she
Yeah,
said.
you mentioned,
was how you
talking
get
about geography,
tissue to
time,
cell.
and then also
India,
influence on people.
Cells become tissues by getting together and they form organs and there are some organs that have tissues in them that make hormones.
Doesn't
So
matter.
technically,
You said
ooh,
that.
so technically.
So then my question is, how would you use this activity to get
All the way
that
around
highest?
here, there's organs, there's an organ system that makes hormones. Oh, and by the way, I accidentally sort of drew this. Oh, and actually organisms, we have organisms of ourselves. We also have organisms on ourselves. Like bacteria,
Like they.
that organisms that are not
Sort of like
us,
branched
but
off,
they're
so like,
bacteria, fungi.
yeah, like I think it depends on the
And
kind of
then
thinking that you do.
we have,
So like
funny
if
thing is,
you are thinking that like kind of.
we have,
In your branch.
I have an assignment
You
that's
might
called
have, you know, two branches.
flip grid,
that sort of
and
like
in a
go
flip,
up
they have
your-
to present a hormone.
Highest tiers,
Okay.
They have to present a
I don't know
hormone,
that
and
it's-
when they present the hormone, they
So I
have to
need
mention the chemical of it. They have to mention
It's gotta be the
which part
hardest
it comes
one
from,
to understand.
what provokes it, and the provocation
So
would be.
the number.
Oh my goodness, the provocation could be someone that comes into your
Like,
house
what's the
and
hardest
it doesn't belong there. And it could also
That
be,
makes sense.
provocation could also be a chemical that you accidentally drink or someone injected you like. So that
I
kind
need
of
to understand how this.
So if the central topic is hormones,
The worldview.
hormones come
Yeah, yeah.
from cells, they're chemicals, they come from tissues.
How
So
you
the central assignment that I give them with
How would you
hormones,
break
I never
this
thought of it
down
this
for
way,
them?
actually,
So they can see the
wraps
connection.
around the levels of organization,
Okay.
if it's given that way. We have to use all these.
Was anybody on the Zoom who had ideas or chats for?
Yep.
Okay.
This is what I got for biology people, which is probably none of them, but I don't know.
I don't think we have any bio people.
If they can see that.
So you have those. Clients on the right.
This is Tyler. What's their name? Heather area.
Right.
What makes.
So what you have is like a lens.
So
in
yeah,
which to
I
see
do
the
have an assignment.
Because that's what our students don't have.
Thinking about it,
That's
sort of.
what they-
They-
You said influence, and what? So then you said, what about time? And over time, people had similar thoughts. Look at.
Tammy helps everyone. Yeah, she's the best.
So maybe
I try.
Feel like she's smiling.
then
after
you
said
throw
that.
out time, you throw out India,
Yeah, so the
you know,
levels of organization.
religion.
Is, I use that all the time for every system. I always start.
And then you say,
I said,
sometimes if I can, I try to come up with a question, it's a question.
Favorite one is.
How has God
Muscle
influenced
tissue.
in different
Like
areas?
there's skeletal muscle tissue that makes up.
And then here's a bunch of hexagons
Heart
that connect.
is considered
That makes sense?
muscular system,
Yeah.
put the heart.
That's right, there we're talking about the
vascular system. And then when it comes to the smooth muscles,
Yes.
oh my gosh, I gotta do that this semester. Smooth muscles, there's
Yeah.
smooth muscles in your stomach that belong to the digestive systems. And the. That gives you goosebumps, that belongs to the integumentary system, so I'm gonna use this for my muscles. No,
So excited
no, I'm
about
serious
it.
about it. I just,
Well, when I found it,
I just had a colleague recommend this for the
oh,
articulations, and I thought, that's that. Now I'm like, oh, I get it, she must have attended your lecture or something like this. Oh, it's your first time? Well, it makes sense now, because she was saying like the joints, synovial joints, there's joints in our skull that don't move much, or don't move at all, then there's like cartilaginous joints that move very little. And she was thinking of putting those down with some details and then having them form one of these.
yeah.
And I thought, yeah, it sounds too postmodern, futuristic, it's not for me. Now I'm like, it's for me, I'm gonna do it.
Try it. Well, just like, once you-
So it's like.
And I didn't want to interrupt
The
you.
first thing, like.
I don't like.
When I write a question, I don't think more than 6
For the work site.
variations of
It's a
questions.
little bit longer.
You know, like,
citation is just the.
The femur,
Yeah.
the bone, the femur, what's the upper part, what's the lower part, what's the back part, what's the bump called, what's that bump
Oh, the
called,
big-
what's that bump? Yeah, there's usually about 5 or 6 anyways.
Yeah.
So for each one, each, bone, I could do one of these, say, today we're
I
gonna
like
focus
the
on the
stack.
femur, you guys focus on
Your
the
paper, I can
the
have.
humerus
Yeah.
or whatever. and they put them together. And, it exists in my mind, but they have to put it together in their mind. They can do it for studying and
So-
for 20 years, or they can use one of
So
these.
like, if you're switching disciplines, then those.
Oh,
are the-
definitely. I like
Now,
that.
this group teach this.
To give them like a hint too, sort of like, little,
Because if you're a history.
indented here or whatever. I like that. This is fun.
I've been enjoying the biology lesson.
Oh,
So are you all?
Yeah.
Good.
sorry.
Okay. So you all good? We'll swap. So you all just share what you came up with.
I'll jump in.
We're bringing them.
Well, I don't know that we have a diagram. We didn't diagram.
Great ideas.
Okay, so our four different tiers we were thinking about in terms of like, oh, let me pull up the notes, because didn't memorize things quickly enough.
Don't forget to tell them your topic.
Yeah, so we were looking inside a history and what we chose Gandhi in particular as like a focal point for this reflection and how we might use this. And so the sort of first level of connection we thought, as was up on the board, would just be a simple word association. And then the next tier we thought would be like the actual person, date, or geographical reason. Next tier up from that, we were thinking about like larger theoretical concepts, peace, religion, concepts like that. And then the highest tier of thinking we thought would be influence of like, how do these things then have influence or control over one another?
So then they said you all put influence right on one
Yes,
hexagon. And then, so what they came up with, and then when they were talking, was a way to identify influences. So they looked at region, they looked at time. And so like, you could put a year, you could put India on, so the scaffolding, you would put that on the hexagons and then you give them to the student and say, okay, how can we identify Gandhi's influence
Yes,
throughout the
influence.
world or throughout whatever?
They talk about culture, the location, the government has been, or even a parent figure, like what makes him influential, what make him an activist and stuff like
And
that.
if influence is that highest tier of learning, you're allowing the student to do this activity to provide them a lens in Gandhi through which to see how influence works at that higher level tier.
Because that's the piece of critical thinking that they often don't have. And so this activity helps build that in them, the ability to figure out, well, how do I organize this information? How do I identify what's critical? Right? All right, let's go to the other groups.
Check, get the real brief version.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess you guys probably heard this already, but for the endocrine system, we put biological hormones in the center. And they are definitely chemicals, and they're related to cells because the cells made them from chemicals of the earth. And so we basically wrap the 6 levels of organization around hormones, and then off to the side, we put like things that are not hormones, including like bacteria that maybe make chemicals that we need, bacteria in our gut. And then also the society that could affect us, whether we're eating chemicals in our, Pepsi or Coke or whatever we're drinking or smoking might affect.
It's a whole
So-
lesson over here, Chastity.
Well, yeah, so I put the hormones in the middle, and then it was, I actually personally link it to an activity where they have to present a hormone. So each student presents a hormone, and theoretically, each presentation is a hormone, hitting on all those connections. But at some point, I need to do this very first day of class with the pituitary gland or something, and all the hormones that it makes and how it can affect you. If you don't have one, you're you stay super short, what's that called? Hypopituitarism. So they can connect it to famous people that are like Gary Coleman. I don't know if anyone knows him anymore, because the students are like 19 years old. But, so I wasn't sure if this is answering, what you were asking about.
Sort of, but you tell them what you told me about which level you found that was the hardest.
Oh yeah, the level of organization for biology that the students seem to have the most difficulty with is the chemical. As soon as I mentioned chemicals or chemistry, they just like disappear. Cellular, the idea that like everything in our body is theoretically made from cells, obviously not the water, we drink that. And then tissues, which are groups of cells, some of them still think of Kleenex or something. Tissues are groups of cells, and that organs are actually made of cells. And the idea that cells get together to make tissues, which are organs, the whole concept is really all in your head, because technically an organ is nothing more than a bunch of cells. If you think about it,
Yeah.
just like the Chicago Bears is nothing but a bunch of individual people wearing uniforms. It's just in our mind, like, oh, they're the 84 Bears or whatever. It's so just like breaking it apart to put it together again is a goal, I guess.
So he was, what I remember is that they would know one area on like the ladder, but they wouldn't see all the areas below it. And so by connecting it, they would see all of the pieces.
They would have to,
Right?
yeah, exactly. That's the point that you gave to me. Like, the point is like, have them put together that which they're having the most difficulty putting together, which is the idea that the body, the collagen made by our skin is made by cells that make collagen. That type of thing. It's definitely a microscopic invisible area for people. Chemicals, what are they? Whether you can't see atoms, so it's almost like imagination in a way. They have to accept it. So sometimes I'll bring salt in. I'll be like, you can taste it and try to make it empirically real, because everything's so abstract, and the universe is so big too, but we won't go there.
Abstract concepts, you give them something tactile that they can touch, they can see, they can tell. All right, let's see what else I have. I think we've hit the high points. Word association alone won't foster the level of critical thinking to reach general course outcomes. So go back to that slide. Third, again, if you look at where we're expecting them to be, like forming arguments, coming up with solutions, making conclusions, word association alone won't be enough for them to get there. So that's why I had you all think about the level of complexity. All right. Make sure I get through, I think I got through everything. So I think you all kind of did that, and you can do that on your own. What I will do is walk you through the resource that I created. And then we'll figure out how to share it with the folks on Zoom.
I'll figure it out, Chastity, thank you.
Actually, I probably could just copy the link and put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if it's-
Oh,
you know what?
This is cool, QR code.
A positive way to have students use their cell phones.
Mhm.
So let me get the link to the
I
Google
got it, Jesse.
Drive. And then share it.
Oh, I got it, Chastity.
Oh, you got it?
Yep,
Perfect.
thank you.
You're welcome. So let me walk you all through the folder. Okay, so I know I could have put these all on one document, but I did them separate because I know how busy we are, and I just wanted to make it simple as possible. You can find what you're looking for. So let me first start with variations, this Google Doc. And so there are different ways that you can do this activity. You can I talked about how you could put images or dates or quotes on the hexagons. There's even a one pager, which I should go back and add a link for the one pager, how you can use that. There's a keyword. I think this one is really neat. And they may not work because you all are watching and that's how that goes. So right here, where the student would have to write out, for example, how is A connected to G? How is G connected to B? So this is an activity that you can have them do to incorporate some writing. This is also an activity that you can have them verbalize to you as a way to show that they understand the concepts. I think this would be a real cool oral exam. You know, if you had students create their hexagons and then come in and use that to verbally show that they understand these concepts. And then there's some more, I mean, people have done all sorts of things. So they put a hexagon inside of a hexagon like this right here. And then you can zoom in to see the different things that are written within the different hexagons. So you can really get creative with how you use them. And then this is a mind map. It's on the same page, but this is the mind map. So even thinking about if you're going to have a discussion, you know, maybe you have students create a hexagon and then they come in, they can look at their notes, have a more engaging discussion. And it's also a way to monitor if they've done the reading without like doing a traditional reading quiz. All right, then I have free templates. So if you want to download your own, you can use these. What I do is I just make them in Word and I just have a document that I save. And in terms of cutting them up, what I do, so like if I were in a real class, while you all were talking, I would be cutting up hexagons for a future class. I like to give students anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes for this activity. So again, it's low prep, but high impact. I mean, you can give them 40 minutes depending on what you're having them do. So there's some free templates there for you. Then if you want to learn more, because I did go through it kind of quickly, I've included some videos and tried to highlight what makes them different. So there are 6 videos there that give you some different strategies and explain the learning activity a bit more. If you want to buy materials, maybe you don't want to sit and cut them out. Maybe that's not your thing, but you still want it to be tactile. Here's some resources that you can use to do that. And yeah, go ahead.
I've not done this, but I'm planning on doing it. Would you recommend the first time that I do it, that anyone does it, that we write on them ahead of time and give it to them?
Yes, so either type on it or handwrite the first time. I recommend the first time as like word association. Because every time I've done this activity, I say, who's done this before? Nobody has done it before. And so it is different. It takes them a little time to get used to it, but I would write on it the first time for them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we can steal this, right?
Please. Yes. I think I went over that one already. So we got blog posts. Oh, maybe I didn't go this one. So just different people talking about their process, how they use it. Some folks have their students write the connections on whatever piece of paper that you give them. So again, you can see different ways that you can have students do the activity. So there's all that there for you. If there's something that's not in there that you want me to add, let me know, and I'm happy to update that for you all. Yes.
Can I ask a silly question?
Sure.
Why have I not heard of this until now? I'm 55 years old.
A lot of my best learning activities come from secondary teachers. So I follow them on social media.
Eighth grade or, high school?
High school, middle school, even elementary school. So that's one reason why I went over why word association is like the lowest level, because when you find it on secondary sites, they're going to be talking about word association. And so then I take those activities and then I just make it college level. That makes sense.
Interesting. So maybe our students have done this before.
No, when I asked them, they
they
haven't.
haven't.
I mean,
Okay.
maybe, hopefully somebody will have done it, but so far, nobody has ever done this activity.
So the other thing, I think we have a different way, like instead of using hexagonal thinking, we're thinking about brainstorming, especially writing paper, but we never thought like, oh, this is a good idea to understand it. It's because again, this is the first time I heard about brainstorming. It's about the paper, how we do it, just different ways. So.
Yeah, brainstorming sounds chaotic. This.
Yeah.
This
is more than.
Feels organized, you know.
What other questions do y'all have?
Have you built this into an assignment before in terms of like, oh, like turn me in something related to this for a paper, like scaffold this as part of something?
So I use it as
Yeah.
it's like a pre-writing discussion.
Okay.
And then I have them write a body paragraph.
Okay.
I use it in my 101 and 102 classes.
Okay.
And I want to use it in my reading and literature class, but time.
Yeah. That was gonna be another question with the kind of answers of like doing this like solo for students, like, oh, do this on your own first versus doing it collaboratively. It seems like each one has its own kind of merits.
I've always done it collaboratively.
Okay.
And that's so, because part of the critical thinking to me also is them talking and them making decisions about what should go here and what should be written here. And then what I've also found is that it improves their motivation, because if they didn't have much to contribute because they didn't do the reading, or they just didn't understand the reading, when they do the activity, it usually, for the most part, can motivate them to say, oh, okay, I get what we're going for. And I also try to do it early on in an assignment. So then when they're reading, I say, take your picture. Now, when you're reading and annotating, look for the things that you put on the hexagons. Yeah. Other questions? All right, so my only ask is two things: that you share this with someone else, give them this idea, pass it on, tell them you got it at TeachECC. We have plenty of seats, they should come next time. And then if you do it, take a picture or just send me an email, let me know how it goes. You know, no pressure, I'm not grading you though. That's it. Thank you all on Zoom.
Thank
I hope
you.
you learned something. Oh, did anybody in Zoom have questions?
There were none in the chat.
No, nothing. No questions.
Right.
Thank you very, very much, Jess.
Yeah, right. That's a great
Three-dimensional.
It's my soccer ball and right on it.
They must-
You know, the other thing, we're thinking, you know, soccer balls.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's-
I think I've seen folks that